All right, 13th, the West Tigers. Uh, who wants to go first?
I think the fearless leader should probably
Should
kick
I?
us off with his team. Yeah.
All right,
Well,
well,
they had 18 points, 8 wins, 16 losses, 500 points for, and 714 against. Average of 21 points for and 30 points against for the season.
was that the worst in the comp?
No, Cowboys were the worst, 31. Yeah.
Look, yes, I had higher expectations, but I don't think a lot of other people did. So maybe I'm the one that's wrong there. I thought they could have pushed, and ultimately they're only a couple of wins out. They had the run there where if they had have beaten Souths, they did beat Penrith, and if they had have got over Parramatta in that game, they may have had a bit more confidence heading in the back end of the year. But that's a long time ago now. There's obviously massive issues. There's defensive issues and commitment issues where I think players need to be held more accountable. I hope. Well, looking at recent news, so Madge has been told he's got another year. There won't be cameras there every waking second. I don't know how much of a difference it makes, but it can't be a disadvantage of not being there. They have cultivated some good young players, and injuries cruelled some of that last year. Their biggest concern for me is leadership. There was just games that they should have won and didn't win because they didn't have a leader. Tamo was disappointing in that regard. I don't think which rightly or wrongly, I don't think he grabbed the team by the balls and said, "Come on, let's go. Let's pull our fingers out and do this." Disappointed in Luke Brooks, who's a 150 game first grade player who still doesn't seem to have that leadership stuff in him, and it's. To be honest, and I don't hate bagging a bloke because his stats I'm sure read really well actually when you look back at him and would fit in another team. But Luke Brooks should have got the Tigers home in a couple of those games, which would have got them a little bit higher. There's some shining lights there. So for me, the best player performances, the back in the obviously I took a Manu. I think this time next year will be on the New South Wales bench. He'll be pretty close to it, and he's already 20th man. He's been in the camp. They like him. He came back a better player from that. Luciano busts his hump every week, has some defensive issues, and Adam Dewey isn't that far off being a representative player. Has a great boot. Still needs to probably learn his role in team. Probably struggles because he's in a team where I think there's a few. I think the deeper issue with him is when their senior players aren't leaders. Some of the younger players are scared of stepping on toes around the leaders. So if you start calling all the shots, then there's a rank thing. But if the rank isn't going to, the higher ranks aren't going to step up, then some of the younger ones do. I believe the opinion within the club is that Dewey's a club captain down the road, so maybe hopefully they back him and run with that. Dane Laurie, fantastic. We talked about him in Rookie of the Year categories. Mamolo was good as a buy, but very, very disappointing apart from that. They've now finally shed a lot of that last bit of dead wood. I hope it's not a case of Madge getting sacked 5 games in. But for me, I'll talk about next year in a minute. I've ranted for long enough. Ollie, what do you make of the Tigers season?
Yeah, well, the big thing I've got here for the Tigers is that they have some great talent for years to come, especially, and we've named all of them. Your Deweys, your Leilua, Stefano, and Dane Laurie are the 4 sort of key players I have there for them going forward, and they definitely will improve. And I'm convinced within the next at least 2 to 3 years they will be back in the top 8 if they back those guys. The biggest disappointment for me, I'm not going to go with Luke Brooks because he's the obvious one, but I've actually gone with David Nofaluma. Last year was in
I'd agree with that too.
representative form. The bloke can't tackle and never has been able to, but at least you're getting that strike rate in attack. And this season, he is just, I don't know what's happened to him. He's just not been good really at all. He's now the club's all-time leading try scorer. I guess good on him for that. But yeah, he was just a big letdown for me in 2021 after realistically with the extended origin squads that the teams had last year was probably actually a bit unlucky to miss out on being selected. I don't know if that's had an impact on him, but yeah, overall, look, there was obviously great signs, and it's not too dissimilar from the Broncos. They put in a good performance. They nearly beat a top team, or they beat a sort of team you wouldn't expect them to beat. And then the next week, they would get beaten easily by just a crap team. The biggest example is when they nearly and arguably should have beaten Parramatta in round 4, I think it was. And then the next week at halftime, they're down 20-0 against the Cowboys, who hadn't won a game all year. So it's just stuff like that. I'm glad they're backing Madge. In terms of the options available, I still think he's probably the best choice out of those for them. And yeah, those players going forward, I think will have a really big impact. Obviously, the English contingent coming over to Gildart and Hastings. Hastings, it'll be interesting because he spoke about how they need leadership. And obviously, it doesn't matter if you're playing Super League NRL, doesn't matter what level leadership is leadership. And he's been a great leader at Wigan. I know that he's pretty much controlled that team. So if he can bring that attitude over to the Tigers, I think it'll help him out a ton.
Pan?
You guys have covered pretty much everything, I think. The absolute shining light, definitely for the Tigers, is Stefano Utoikamanu. I thought he was brilliant, especially at the back end of this season. He looks like he's going to grow into being one of the better front rowers running around in the competition. I had the Tigers finishing 13th. Funny enough, I actually got a couple right. I didn't get much of the top right, but I got a few right down towards the bottom here, and I think I had 5th, 6th, and 7th right as well. But yeah, the Tigers' biggest concern was always going to be their control from their spine. Basically, their 9, their 7, and their 6 was always my question marks on where they would go. Their outside backs were very disappointing at different times of the year. Obviously, young Tommy Talau, he's got a really good game in him, but then he's got 2 or 3 shockers in him as well. His hands get really bad at different times. And they just seem to lose their composure under pressure, especially their halves. Obviously, Dewey had to take over a lot of leadership for this team, getting them around the field and actually setting up points for this team, which is surprising considering, as you mentioned, you've got a bloke there who's played 150-odd first-grade games who should be the guy doing that and just doesn't seem to want to do it.
Yeah,
He doesn't no interest in leading the team around. He just wants to play a part. The 9's a big issue for them. I know you've got Little and Simpkins there, but at times the service coming out of 9 was really bad. When you compare it to some of the other 9s running around, Little works his ass off in defence, but he's got a few issues with his service off the ground. Simpkins seems to be the other way around a little bit. He's a bit hit and miss with his defence, but his service is a fair bit better and a bit quicker than what you get out of Little. So if you combine the two of them, maybe you get something going on there. But yeah, the 9 worries me. This, as I said, their centres were deplorable at times. A lot of points came through their outside backs where teams would just get on a roll and they'd continually hit that same spot and score a lot of points. The Tigers need, obviously that's where their biggest problem is. They need to fix up some of their defensive structures. I don't know if it's a training thing or if it's just blokes. They seem to get their head down and then they just get steamrolled. A confidence thing,
and that's
sure,
I still feel that's a leadership thing, that they need someone to put the rocket up them sometimes, and I don't
pep them back up. Yeah, absolutely. Top point scorer was Dewey with 174. Top try scorer was Mamalo. I think he got a few of those before he came across, but he ended up with 15 tries.
Not many though. Not many.
No, yeah. Little had an average of 39 tackles a game. He made 791 for the season, but his efficiency of 84%. Most run meters was 158 on an average for Mamalo, again with 3,300 running meters. Twile with 280 hit ups, who was good. He's obviously not someone who takes a game by a scruff of a neck, but he gets in there and does his work. Marlowe with 14 line breaks, 16 line break assists and 17 try assists from Dewey. And Nofaluma had 3 or 4 of the higher watermarks for the team. He had 50 offloads, but as I mentioned, I think a few of those were when he was going out to touch. 89 tackle busts, but he had 29 errors as well, which doesn't help.
Yeah, well, the surprising stat was Tigers were second on the offload chart to Parramatta, I believe. So
yeah, they did throw the ball around. There's something to be, you can work with something like that, but they need 1 or 2 blokes that can sort of bust a hole in the middle as well, rather than just sort of run up and get tackled. Brooks with 15 penalties conceded for the season. Talau with 18 handling errors. And Brooks again with 76 missed tackles for the Tigers.
I think, for me, a lot's going to actually depend on the next 3 months, because you've got 1.5 mil to spend. There's your Tarek Sims of the world. I wouldn't go near Tyrone Peachy, with all due respect to him. So I'll be almost not overpaying, but trying to offer Tarek 600 if you can get him to Tiger. I think he'll make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And there's not a lot else around at the moment. But there'll be changes. There'll be swaps and changes between all sorts of clubs coming up. If it was me, I would be looking to try and have Hastings start at 7, Dewey at 6, and if Brooks is still there, play him at 14, and then pick a hooker, and then go right. We're going to back. I'd probably back Simpkins because I think his service is better. There's games where he offered, and he's still growing, but there's games where he offered some lovely intensity in service from dummy half. So I would be backing him. You throw Laurie back in there, Gildart. At least that gives you something to work with. Is sort of where I'm going. So, mail was today from Brent Reed, Brent Reed's almost on James Hooper level for me these days. But he reported that they are looking at Shane Flanagan or Dean Pay as a defensive coach. So we will see, and we'll see what that means. I probably wouldn't be unhappy with either, but it's not up to Madge. It's going to be a decision for our fabled board. Any final words on the Tigers, gentlemen?
I guess I should just jump in and bring it up and admit defeat. But I actually had the Tigers winning the wooden spoon this year, and they didn't. So shame on me for that. And I guess just one last thing on the Tigers is that hopefully their ex-premiership winning coach Tim Sheen's coming back into the fold is a positive for the club and really helps them out.